My daughter-in-law had no idea I'd been studying Mandarin for the past 6 months. When I heard what she told those investors about me at that restaurant, sitting right there across the table from me, I understood why my late husband had squeezed my hand at their wedding and whispered, "Keep your eyes open with that one, Ellie." I should have listened. I really should have listened. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. Most people call me Ellie. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 41 years as a pediatric nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center in Oregon. I retired 4 years ago, 2 months before my husband James was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was gone within 5 months. 63 years old, strong as an oak his entire life, and the cancer ate through him like fire through paper. We'd been married for 43 years. I still reach for his side of the bed every morning. James and I raised one son, Marcus. He's 39 now, an architect, smart, talented, kind in the way his father was kind, quiet, and steady. He married Victoria 8 years ago. Everyone calls her Vicky, though she prefers Victoria in professional settings. She works in international real estate, brokering deals between American developers and overseas investors. She's sharp, she's polished. She has this way of walking into a room and making you feel like you should apologize for already being there. James never warmed to her. At their wedding rehearsal dinner, he leaned over and said, "She looks at people like she's calculating what they're worth to her. Watch yourself, Ellie." I told him he was being unfair. "She's nervous," I said. "She's trying to impress us." He'd just shaken his head. "Nervous people fidget. She doesn't fidget. She assesses." James was a high school football coach for 30 years. He could read people the way some folks read weather, just by feel, just by instinct. I wish I'd had the same gift. After James died, I did what I've always done. I kept busy. I helped Marcus and Victoria with their 2 children, my grandchildren, Sophie, who just turned 11, and Noah, who's 8. I drove them to school 3 mornings a week. I picked them up from swim practice. I made casseroles and dropped them off, labeled and dated, because Victoria never had time to cook and Marcus worked late most nights. I sat in the front row at Sophie's dance recitals and Noah's Little League games. I thought I was needed. I thought I was helping. Victoria never told me otherwise. Not directly. She has this talent for making you feel unwelcome without saying a single unwelcoming word. She'd open the door when I arrived and glance at her watch. She'd say, "Oh, you brought dinner again. We actually ordered Thai, but I'm sure Marcus will eat it tomorrow." She'd call me Eleanor instead of Ellie or Mom, which is what I'd asked her to call me years ago. Small things, paper cuts. None of them deep enough to bleed, but after a while, you realize you're covered in them. Marcus didn't notice. He was buried in work. His firm had landed a massive contract to design a mixed-use development in downtown Portland, and he was pulling 16-hour days. When I mentioned that Victoria seemed distant, he sighed. "She's stressed, Mom. The real estate market is brutal right now. Don't take it personally." So I didn't. I swallowed it down the way women of my generation were taught to swallow things down, with a smile and a change of subject. The Mandarin started because of Sophie. My granddaughter is one of those children who becomes completely consumed by whatever captures her attention. Last year, it was marine biology. She wanted to be a dolphin trainer. This year, it's Chinese culture. She watched a documentary about the Forbidden City, and something clicked in her brain. She started checking out books on Chinese history from the library. She begged for a calligraphy set for her birthday. She found free Mandarin lessons on YouTube and began scribbling characters in a notebook she carried everywhere. "Grandma, did you know that the Chinese character for home is a pig under a roof?" she told me one Saturday afternoon, her eyes enormous. "And the character for good is a woman next to a child. Isn't that beautiful?" It was beautiful, and watching her excitement reminded me of something James used to say. "The day you stop being curious is the day you start dying." He'd wanted us to travel after retirement. China was on the list, along with a dozen other places. The trips never happened. The diagnosis came instead. I found a Mandarin class at the Multnomah County Library, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, taught by a retired professor named Dr. Linda Huang, a tiny woman in her 70s with silver hair and a laugh that could fill an auditorium. She'd grown up in Taipei, moved to Oregon in her 20s, and taught linguistics at Portland State for 35 years. Learning Mandarin at 67? She said when I told her my age. Good. The brain is a muscle. If you don't use it, it turns to oatmeal. And not the good kind. I loved her immediately. The classes were hard. Mandarin has 4 tones, and if you get the tone wrong, you're saying a completely different word. The character ma with a flat tone means mother. Ma with a falling rising tone means horse. Mix those up and you've got a problem. But I'd spent 4 decades memorizing medical terminology, drug interactions, dosage calculations. My brain knew how to learn. It just needed a reason. Sophie was my reason. And maybe James was too. Every time I mastered a new phrase, I'd think, James, can you see this? Your stubborn wife is learning Chinese. I downloaded an app on my phone. I found a language exchange partner online, a lovely woman named May in Shanghai, who wanted to practice English. We video called twice a week. She taught me about Chinese tea culture, about family traditions during Lunar New Year, about how in China, grandparents often live with their children and are considered the backbone of the household. In China, we say, "Lo ren shi jia zhong de bao," May told me once. It means old people are the treasure of the family. Without them, the family has no roots. I thought about that a lot. I didn't tell anyone about the Mandarin, not Marcus, not Sophie, not my friend Diane, who I've known since nursing school. It felt private, like a garden I was tending just for myself. 6 months of classes, apps, conversation practice, and K-drama equivalents, Chinese television dramas that Dr. Huang recommended for listening comprehension. I wasn't fluent, not even close, but I could follow conversations. I could understand the gist of what people were saying, and I was getting better every week. Then Victoria called me. It was a Tuesday, about a month ago. She never called me unless she needed something. Eleanor, I have a favor to ask. No, hello. No, how are you? Just straight to business. That's Victoria. Of course. What do you need? Marcus has a very important dinner on Saturday. The Chen Group from Shanghai. They're investors, major ones. Marcus designed a building for their American subsidiary, and now they want to expand. It's a multi-million-dollar deal. We're taking them to Jade Mountain, that upscale Chinese restaurant in the Pearl District. That sounds wonderful. Mrs. Chen, the founder, she's old school, very traditional. She specifically asked if Marcus's parents would attend. Family is extremely important in Chinese business culture. Obviously, James is gone, but I told them his mother would be there. My heart lifted a little. An invitation. A chance to be part of something. I'd love to come. Great. A pause. Just, Eleanor, these are sophisticated people. International. You don't need to talk about nursing or Portland weather or anything like that. Just be pleasant. Smile. Let Marcus and Mimi handle the conversation. There it was. The paper cut. Be there, but don't be yourself. I understand. Wear something nice. Not the floral thing you wore to Noah's birthday. Something appropriate. I'll manage. Perfect. Marcus will pick you up at 5:30. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, looking at the photo of James on the refrigerator. He was wearing his coaching windbreaker, whistle around his neck, grinning at the camera. I know, I said to the photo. You told me so. I spent the rest of the week quietly panicking about what to wear. I finally settled on a charcoal gray wrap dress, simple pearl earrings James had given me for our 30th anniversary, and black heels that I hadn't worn since his funeral. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like what I was, a 67-year-old woman trying not to take up too much space. Saturday came. Marcus picked me up right on time. He looked tired but excited. Mom, this is huge. If Mrs. Chen signs off, we're looking at 3 new buildings over the next 5 years. It could change everything for the firm. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Victoria was in the passenger seat, immaculate in a black dress, her dark hair pulled into a sleek twist. She looked back at me through the rearview mirror. You look fine, Eleanor. Fine. Not lovely. Not great. Fine. Thank you. Jade Mountain was the kind of restaurant that makes you lower your voice the moment you step inside. Dark wood, soft lighting, private rooms separated by carved screens. The hostess led us to a large round table in the back, the kind with a lazy Susan in the center, already set with delicate porcelain. 3 people were seated there. They stood as we entered. Mrs. Chen was the first person I noticed. She was perhaps 70, maybe older, with white hair swept back elegantly and the kind of posture that suggests a lifetime of discipline. She wore a deep red silk blouse and moved with quiet authority. This was a woman accustomed to being in charge. Beside her stood a younger man, maybe mid-40s, introduced as Mr. Liu, her director of operations, and next to him, a woman around my age named Mrs. Zhao, who Mrs. Chen introduced as her oldest friend and personal advisor. Mrs. Chen took both my hands when we were introduced. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Mrs. Whitfield, Marcus speaks of you with such love. I am very sorry about your husband." Her English was accented but clear. Her eyes were warm and searching, the kind of eyes that don't miss much. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. It's an honor to meet you." She held my gaze for a moment longer than expected, then nodded, as if I'd passed some invisible test. We sat down. Marcus and Mr. Liu immediately began discussing project timelines and budgets. Victoria positioned herself next to Mrs. Chen, pouring tea, making conversation. She was good at this, I had to admit. She knew which questions to ask, when to laugh, when to defer. The food began arriving: dumplings, crispy Peking duck, steamed fish with ginger and scallion, mapo tofu that made my eyes water. Mrs. Chen insisted on serving me personally, placing the choicest pieces on my plate. "Mrs. Whitfield, you must try the lion's head meatballs. This restaurant makes them the way my mother used to. They're delicious. Thank you." I was doing exactly what Victoria had asked, smiling, being pleasant, not talking too much. Furniture with a pulse. About an hour in, after the business discussions had wound down and the atmosphere had relaxed, I noticed Mrs. Chen turn to Mrs. Zhao and begin speaking in Mandarin, quiet, casual, the way you might chat with an old friend at a dinner party. Mr. Liu joined in occasionally. Victoria leaned forward. "Mrs. Chen, I should mention, I'm conversational in Mandarin. I studied in Beijing for a semester during graduate school. Please, speak freely. I can translate for Marcus if needed." Marcus looked surprised. "You never mentioned that." Victoria waved her hand. It never seemed relevant. Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow slightly but smiled. "How wonderful. Then we can be more comfortable." And just like that, the conversation shifted. Half English, half Mandarin, with Victoria translating selected bits for Marcus. I sat there with my teacup, following along, because I understood, not every word, but enough. Mrs. Zhao commented in Mandarin that the fish was overcooked. Mrs. Chen disagreed. Mr. Liu made a joke about his wife's cooking that made both women laugh. Normal dinner conversation. I almost relaxed. Then Victoria said something that made my stomach drop. She said it casually, in Mandarin, while refilling Mrs. Chen's tea. "Bie dangxin, ta ting budong. Wal manke sui bian sho." "Don't worry, she can't understand. We can say whatever we want." Mrs. Zhao glanced at me. "Zhe yang shuo butai alba." "Isn't that a bit disrespectful?" Victoria laughed softly. "Ta lian dian hua do butai hui yong, geng bie shuo ting dong zhong wen le." She can barely work her phone, let alone understand Chinese. My hands tightened around my teacup. I kept my face still. 41 years of nursing had taught me how to stay calm when everything inside you is screaming. I'd held children through seizures without flinching. I could handle this. Mrs. Chen said nothing. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed her eyes flick toward me for just a moment. Victoria continued in Mandarin, her voice light, almost gossipy, as if she were sharing amusing stories with girlfriends. "Shozhende, ta zhuzai valmen fujin shigadaventi. Mie tian do yao lai, zua fan, jie haidzi. Heoxiang je shi ta de jia yang." Honestly, her living so close is a real problem. She shows up every day, cooking, picking up the kids, acting like it's her house. Mrs. Zhao set down her chopsticks slowly. "Marcos tai xin run le, bu kien gen ta shuo, danwa yi jing zai kanya en glo yuan le." Victoria took a sip of wine. "Marcus is too soft-hearted to say anything, but I've already been looking at assisted living places." My blood turned to ice. I kept chewing. I kept smiling. I watched a woman I had tried to love for 8 years describe me like a problem to be solved. Yo yi jia zai Beaverton, hen piao liang. Wagao su Marcus shuo ta yi jie ren ju bu anquan, ta ju hui tong yi de, ta zhang shi ting wo de. There's one in Beaverton. Very nice. I'll tell Marcus it's not safe for her to live alone, and he'll agree. He always does what I say. Mr. Liu shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He glanced at Marcus, who was scrolling through building plans on his tablet, oblivious. Mrs. Chen still hadn't spoken. She was watching Victoria the way a cat watches a bird, perfectly still, completely focused. Victoria must have taken the silence as encouragement. Zui fo de shi ta zi ji do bu ji dao, ta yue wamen suyao ta, kishi wamen jushi suyao ta de mi en fe biom fuwu. Jiang hai zi men zai za I dian, yu bu suyao ta le. The best part is, she has no idea. She thinks we need her. Really, we just need her free babysitting. Once the kids are a little older, we won't need her at all. She laughed at her own words, a light, tinkling laugh. The laugh of someone who thinks she's being clever. Mrs. Zhao turned to Mrs. Chen and said quietly, "Je rangwa hen bu shufu." This makes me very uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen finally spoke. In Mandarin, she said, "Rang ta shuawan." Let her finish. Something in her tone made the table go quiet. Victoria didn't seem to notice the shift. She was emboldened now, the wine loosening whatever restraint she normally kept in place. "Wazidao ze tingchilai hen kanren," Victoria said. "Dantai jing lole yo gudan, ta zehu yue lai yi lai woman. Sianzai ji jue bi ho ji jue ho." I know it sounds cruel, but she's old and lonely. She's only going to become more dependent. Better to deal with it now than later. She said the word old the way you'd say broken or expired, like a condition, not a stage of life, like something that should be discarded before it becomes inconvenient. Mrs. Chen set down her teacup with a soft click. She looked directly at me, and in that moment I saw recognition in her eyes. Not surprise, exactly. Something deeper, understanding. In perfect, deliberate English, she said, "Mrs. Whitfield, I would very much like to hear your thoughts on family. In your experience, what holds a family together?" Everyone looked at me. Victoria's smile flickered, just slightly. I could have let it go. I could have smiled and said something pleasant about love and patience, and let the evening end, and gone home to my quiet house, and cried into the pillow that still smells faintly of James's aftershave. But James had also said something else to me, years ago, when I'd told him about a doctor at the hospital who was mistreating nurses. He'd said, "Ellie, there's a difference between keeping the peace and losing yourself. Don't confuse the two." I set my teacup down. I looked at Mrs. Chen, and I responded in Mandarin. "Jia ting gao de shi zung zong bu shi inwei yoren yu yong ge de, shi inwei tam shi ni de jaren." Family is held together by respect, and respect isn't given because someone is useful. It's given because they are family. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the kitchen sounds through the wall. Victoria's face went white. Completely, utterly white, like someone had pulled a plug and drained all the color out of her. Marcus looked up from his tablet. "Mom, was that Mandarin?" I continued, switching to English so my son could understand every word. "Yes, Marcus. I've been learning Mandarin for 6 months. Your daughter got me interested. She's fascinated with Chinese culture, and I wanted to understand it better. Dr. Huang at the Multnomah County Library has been teaching me. I practice twice a week with a conversation partner in Shanghai. I'm not fluent, but I understood everything your wife just said about me." "What did she say?" Marcus's voice was very quiet. Mrs. Zhao answered before I could. "Your wife told us, in Mandarin, that your mother is a burden, that she plans to put her in an assisted living facility without her knowledge, that she only tolerates her for free childcare. She called her old and dependent. She said you would agree to whatever she decided because you always do." Marcus stared at Victoria. "Tell me she's wrong." Victoria's mouth opened and closed. "Marcus, it wasn't like that. I was just venting. It's been stressful and—" "Were you looking at facilities?" His voice was flat, a voice I'd never heard from my son before. "In Beaverton, were you actually looking?" I was just browsing. For the future. In case. Yes or no, Victoria? The pause lasted 3 seconds. It felt like 30. Yes. But only because I'm worried about her safety. You told these people that my mother barely knows how to use her phone. You called her old and lonely like those are insults. You laughed about it. Marcus pushed back from the table. My mother was a nurse for 41 years. She held dying children in her arms and then drove home and made dinner for our family. She took care of my father through 5 months of cancer without complaining once. She has spent the last 3 years helping raise your children while you close deals and I work late. And you laugh about her? Marcus, you're making a scene. No. You made the scene. In a language you assumed my mother was too stupid to understand. Except she wasn't, was she? Because she's been studying for 6 months and none of us noticed because we weren't paying attention. Mrs. Chen raised her hand slightly. The gesture was small, but it carried the authority of someone who has led boardrooms for decades. Everyone fell silent. Mr. Whitfield, she said. Please sit down. Marcus sat. Mrs. Chen turned to me. She spoke in Mandarin, slowly and clearly. Mrs. Whitfield, Lu Zhe Yue, Sui Dao, Zhe Zhe Shengdu, Hen Liu Buk, Ni De Fayin, Hen Hub. To reach this level in 6 months is impressive. Your pronunciation is quite good. Xiexinin, I said. Wa de lo Shihenyo Ushu. Thank you. My teacher is excellent. Mrs. Chen smiled. Then she turned to Victoria, and the smile disappeared. Mrs. Whitfield, in Chinese culture we have a saying, Jia yo yi lo, ru yo yi bio. A family with an elder is a family with a treasure. I am 72 years old. I built my company from nothing. I have 93 employees in Shanghai and 40 here in America. And every morning, my son calls me before he goes to work. Not because I ask him to, because he understands that I am the root, and without the root, the tree falls. She looked at Victoria. You see your mother-in-law as a weight. I see a woman who learned my language at 67 because her granddaughter's eyes lit up when she talked about Chinese characters. That is not weakness. That is strength. That is love. And frankly, Mrs. Whitfield, it is more than I have seen from you tonight. Mr. Liu spoke for the first time in a while. Mrs. Chen is right. In our culture, what has been said tonight would bring deep shame to a family. The way you speak about the mother of your husband to strangers at a business dinner, it reveals something about character that cannot be unsaid. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of shame or tears of anger at being caught. After 8 years, I still couldn't read her. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe she'd always been unreadable because there was nothing real underneath the polish. Mrs. Chen, please, Victoria said. This has nothing to do with the business deal. This is a family matter. Everything is a family matter, Mrs. Chen said. Business is trust. Trust is character. Character is shown in how you treat those who cannot fight back. Your mother-in-law sat at this table and smiled while you mocked her. She held her composure with more grace than I have seen from executives half her age. That tells me everything I need to know about the Whitfield family, and very little of it has to do with you. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Whitfield, I will not cancel our agreement. Your work is excellent, and I do not punish a man for his wife's words. But I want you to understand something. I chose to work with your firm because you told me, in our first meeting, that your mother was the strongest person you knew, that she taught you that doing good work means caring about the people your work serves. I believed you. I still believe you. But belief requires proof. Show me that the values you described are real. Not in your blueprints. In your life. Marcus nodded slowly. His eyes were red. Yes, ma'am. Victoria stood up. I think I should leave. I think that's wise, Mrs. Zhao said, not unkindly. Victoria picked up her purse. She looked at me, and for a moment, something flickered across her face. Not remorse. Recognition. The recognition that she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Eleanor, Not tonight, I said. Please. Not tonight. She left. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, growing fainter until the restaurant door opened and closed. Marcus started to stand. I should go after her. Let her go, Mrs. Chen said. Stay. Your mother should not eat alone. He sat back down. He looked at me across the table, and he looked exactly the way he had at 12 years old when he'd struck out at the championship game and walked back to the dugout trying not to cry. Mom, I didn't know. I know, sweetheart. How long has she been like this? I thought about it. Honestly. Not with anger, not with self-pity, just honestly. It started small. After your father died, maybe it was there before and I just didn't see it because James was a buffer. He had a way of taking up space in a room that didn't leave room for cruelty. Why didn't you tell me? Because you love her. Because I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who causes problems. Because I kept hoping I was wrong. Mrs. Zhao reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her palm was warm and papery. You are not wrong, and you are not a burden. I felt the tears then. I'd been holding them since Victoria's first words in Mandarin, pressing them down with 41 years of professional composure. And now they came, quiet and steady, running down my face and dripping onto the white tablecloth. Mrs. Chen handed me a silk handkerchief. Cry, she said. There is no shame in tears. There is only shame in cruelty. We sat there for another 2 hours. Mrs. Chen ordered more tea and a dessert of sweet red bean soup that tasted like something my own grandmother might have made if my grandmother had been Chinese instead of Irish. We talked about our husbands, both gone. Mrs. Chen had lost hers 12 years ago. Mrs. Zhao's husband had passed just last year. We talked about our grandchildren and our aching knees and the strange freedom of getting older, the freedom of no longer caring what people think of you. Mrs. Chen told me about growing up poor in a village outside Shanghai, about coming to America with $200 and a degree no one recognized, about building her company one contract at a time while raising 3 children alone after her husband's stroke. People looked at me and saw a small Chinese woman, she said. They assumed I was quiet, passive, easy to push aside. I let them think that, and then I outworked every single one of them. I understand that, I said. I know you do. Before we left, Mrs. Chen took my hands again. Mrs. Whitfield, I would like to invite you and your granddaughter to Shanghai this spring. My company sponsors a cultural exchange program for seniors, language immersion, calligraphy workshops, tea ceremonies, guided tours. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. We started it because I believe that understanding between cultures begins with people like you, people who are curious enough to learn. I stared at her. Mrs. Chen, I can't accept that. Why not? It's too generous. She squeezed my hands. Generosity is what happens when you recognize value that others have overlooked. Your daughter-in-law overlooked you. I do not intend to make the same mistake. Besides, Mrs. Zhao will be leading the program. She could use the company. Mrs. Zhao smiled. I could. Please say yes. I need someone to complain about my knees with. I laughed. It came out watery and broken, but it was real. My granddaughter Sophie will lose her mind. Then it's settled. Mr. Liu shook my hand. Mrs. Whitfield, your Mandarin really is impressive for 6 months. When you come to Shanghai, we'll have you fluent in no time. Marcus drove me home. We didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. The city lights slid past the windows, blurred and beautiful. Finally, he said, I've been a terrible son. No, you've been a busy son. There's a difference. Not much of one. Marcus, listen to me. Your father used to say that the hardest part of loving someone isn't the big moments. It's the small ones. The ones that happen on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody's watching. The moments where you either pay attention or you don't. You stopped paying attention. That doesn't make you terrible. It makes you human. She was going to put you in a home, Mom. Without telling me. Without asking you. Yes, and you would have gone. Because you wouldn't have wanted to cause trouble. I didn't answer. Because he was right. And we both knew it. That's never happening, he said. I don't care what I have to do. That is never happening. Marcus, don't make decisions tonight. You're angry. I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken. There's a difference. We pulled into my driveway. The porch light was on. The azaleas James had planted 15 years ago were blooming along the walkway, stubborn and gorgeous in the dark. Mom? Yes? You really learned Mandarin. In 6 months. I did. For Sophie? For Sophie. For your father. For me. Because I'm 67 years old and I refuse to believe that I've already become everything I'm going to be. He leaned across the console and hugged me. Not a quick hug, not the dutiful kind, a real one, the kind where you hold on because you're afraid of what happens if you let go. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Now go home. Call me tomorrow. 3 weeks later, Marcus moved into an apartment 6 blocks from my house. He and Victoria were separating. The details were painful and complicated, as these things always are. The children took it hard at first, Sophie especially, but children are resilient when they feel safe, and Marcus made sure they felt safe. Sophie and Noah started spending more time at my house. Not because anyone needed free childcare, but because they wanted to be there. Sophie and I studied Mandarin together at the kitchen table, while Noah built Lego cities on the living room floor. We ate dinner together 3 or 4 nights a week. Real dinners. At the table, with conversation and laughter and the occasional argument about bedtime. Mrs. Chen kept her word. The Shanghai trip was booked for April. Sophie had already started packing, even though it was only January. "Grandma, we're going to walk on the Great Wall. We're going to eat real dumplings. We're going to see the Terracotta Warriors." The Terracotta Warriors are in Xi'an, not Shanghai. "Then we're going to Xi'an, too." I laughed and pulled her close. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and possibility. Marcus signed the expanded contract with the Chen Group last month. Mrs. Chen attended the signing ceremony and brought her grandson, who was Noah's age. The 2 boys spent the entire event playing on their tablets, oblivious to the business happening around them. "Mrs. Chen watched them and said to me, quietly, 'This is what it's really about. Not the buildings, not the money, the next generation, and the generation that teaches them.'" I nodded. My husband used to say something similar. He said the only thing that lasts is what you pass on. Your husband was a wise man. He was. I miss him every day. Of course you do. That's the price of loving well. If you're listening to this, and you feel invisible, if the people around you have decided what you are and what you're worth, and you've started to believe them, I want to tell you something. You are not finished. You are not a burden. You are not too old to surprise everyone, including yourself. Learn something new, not because someone told you to, not because it's practical, because it reminds you that you're alive, that your brain still works, that the world is bigger than the small box someone else has built for you. Stand up for yourself, even when your voice shakes, especially when your voice shakes. Don't let anyone, not a daughter-in-law, not a son, not a society that treats aging like a disease, convince you that your best days are behind you. Because here's what I learned at 67 years old, sitting in a Chinese restaurant in Portland, Oregon, responding in a language no one expected me to understand. The most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear. Not with anger, not with revenge, just with quiet, stubborn, unapologetic growth. And if you're very lucky, one day you'll be on a plane to Shanghai with your granddaughter, flying toward an adventure you never saw coming, and you'll look out the window and think, "James, I'm not done yet. Not even close." Trust me, it's worth every minute.